After selling his firm, this person, who was not only extremely affluent, but also astonishingly multidimensional, had an astounding net worth equal to a stunning 2% of America's gross domestic product. When you consider the scale of his fortune and the influence it had on his life and the world around him, it is absolutely astonishing. Notwithstanding his numerous complexity, there is no disputing just a few people have created fortunes as big as Andrew Carnegie's over the long history of humanity. Seeing his father suffer while he begged for employment had a large effect on the young Carnegie. In 1848, the Carnegie family sold all they owned and borrowed £20 to leave Scotland in hopes of a better life. They traveled to America, the land of opportunity, and settled in Pittsburgh, the industrial capital of the world. Even in their new country, they found it difficult to avoid suffering and had to start their lives over. Andrew Carnegie's family experienced major financial difficulties, with both his father and mother unable to find work. As a result, Carnegie was compelled to drop out of school in order to support his family. Thankfully, he was able to escape the intense heat of the boiler rooms when he got a job as a messenger boy at a local telegraph office. He delivered telegrams all around Pittsburgh on his bike, learning the faces of everyone he met so he could welcome them by name whenever he encountered them outside of work. This gave Carnegie an ideal opportunity to become involved with the city's commercial world. He developed his telegraph abilities and became increasingly adept at hearing Morse code at the age of 17. He could recite messages without having to write them down. Thomas Scott, a regional manager for the Pennsylvania Railroad Company, saw Carnegie's aptitude and recruited him as his personal telegrapher and private secretary for $35 per month. The Pennsylvania Railroad Company was the greatest enterprise in the world at the time, and it gave an incredible opportunity for Andrew Carnegie, who was a business adept. He got a front row seat to see how a successful industry was operated. Tom Scott, Carnegie's supervisor, recognized his talents and started to mentor him, becoming like a second father to him. Carnegie's first taste of capitalism came from Tom's advice to invest in stocks. During the American Civil War, Carnegie was enlisted into the Union Army. Instead of participating in the battle, he discovered a method to benefit from it. Carnegie was able to avoid danger by paying $850 for a replacement to take his place on the battlefield. On this occasion, he noted that the wooden bridges were often burned by the military and that iron bridges were greatly needed to replace them. Andrew Carnegie saw an opportunity and started the Keystone Bridge Company. His next action, meanwhile, cemented his reputation as a savvy businessman. Keystone Bridge Company not only built bridges, but also possessed iron mills that supplied the iron needed to create the bridges. Because Carnegie owned the iron supply, his bridge-building enterprise was not reliant on mines or extraction corporations for iron, as their competitors were. This not only allowed him more control over the entire process, but it also increased their profit margins. As the bridge was completed, Carnegie profited from his contacts in the railway sector. He was essentially running a triad of three businesses, each of which supported the others. His first firm would be a mining extraction company, followed by a bridge-building company that would utilize the iron supplied by his mine company. And lastly, after the bridge was finished, his third business would monetize by selling rails. This strategy was a success, allowing Carnegie to increase his money and extend his empire. Andrew Carnegie set his sights on the rich city of New York City, intending to network with other famous business people and find new businesses to pursue. Yet, he found the richer people around him to be scoundrels, forcing him to compose a note to himself, resolving to retire in 2 years and devote his time to making the world a better place. This note, however, fell unfilled when he came upon the new development of the Bessemer converter in 1856. The pier-shaped furnace enabled mass manufacturing of steel, allowing big structures to be erected with steel for the first time in history, giving rise to the first skyscrapers and permanently changing city skyline. Carnegie realized the power of this new technology right away and hurried quickly to construct America's first steel factories. He employed the greatest engineers and architects money could buy and concentrated on improving productivity via the use of cutting-edge technologies. He pushed his staff to the limits of their physical and mental ability, even ordering them to work 364 days a year with only one day off on July 4th. As technology advanced, he explored methods to replace his labor with machines, knowing that machines did not require sleep, raises, or union representation. Rather than Carnegie Steel, he elected to name his company after one of his railroad clients, J. Edgar Thomson Steel Works. He believed that by expressing gratitude for their business, he would be able to gain further orders from their railroad, and he succeeded. Thomson's original order included 2,000 steel rails. This performance was more than a sales gimmick. It was part of a bigger strategy of publicly expressing admiration for others' acts, which would pay huge returns throughout Carnegie's career. He hired Henry Clay, a harsh businessman noted for his ruthlessness and commitment to the bottom line, to assist operate Carnegie Steel mills. Carnegie's obsession with efficiency, usage of cutting-edge technology, and strategic decision-making enabled him to create an industrial empire that would transform the globe. Carnegie and Frick were a powerful combo whose business tactics highlighted their ruthlessness. The tale of the Duquesne Works is a great example of this. Carnegie circulated a word that Duquesne's mill was producing poor steel, which was incorrect, but didn't matter. Carnegie lied to Kane's railroad clients that their tracks lacked uniformity, scaring away railroads concerned about not receiving decent products. This led Duquesne's sales to decrease, leaving them unprofitable and resulting in their sale to Carnegie at a loss. Carnegie and Frick were recognized for going to any length to succeed, but their ruthlessness came at a price. Carnegie had spent millions of dollars to improve the efficiency of Homestead, one of their major steel operations in Homestead, Pennsylvania, and it was now the most productive mill of its size. Nevertheless, labor expenses were yet to be improved, which caused a challenge for Carnegie, who was attempting to recast himself as a champion of workers' rights rather than a despotic steel industry tycoon. Instead of damaging his image, he delegated the nasty task of slashing salaries for 10,000 low-wage workers to his right-hand man, Henry Frick, in 1892. Conflicts between employees and mill owners grew as the wealth divide widened, and laborers believed they were the property of the wealthy. The wealthiest Americans were building fortunes quicker than at any other point in American history. To make matters worse, Frick wanted more factory output, which meant working longer hours for less salary. When workers denied these tough demands, Frick locked out all staff and replaced them with a group of foreign laborers ready to handle risky duties for less pay. Frick hired a 300-person army for hire called the Pinkertons, who were equipped with guns, to assist the immigrant workers as they made their way to the plant. They were welcomed by 10,000 enraged strikers who refused to give up their house. It is unknown who fired the first shot, but the day would be known as the Homestead Massacre rather than the Homestead Strike. Hundreds of people were hurt, including 9 manufacturing workers and 7 Pinkertons, who unfortunately did not make it. The governor dispatched 8,000 militiamen to give assistance, and the plant reopened under their protection. Alas, Carnegie's employees returned to work with lesser pay, longer hours, and the same safety conditions. Carnegie's reputation suffered as a result of Homestead's collateral effect. Prior to the Homestead tragedy, Carnegie publicly fought for improved working conditions and higher salaries in steel mills. Yet, his actions were contrary with his ideals, as he cut labor expenses by lowering wages while doing little to make his factories a safer place to work. Carnegie was generally seen as a coward for making Frick his scapegoat, not just for the disaster, but also for all of the other nasty things he did not want his name linked with. Quite apart from the tensions and resentment, the steel mills thrived, and by 1900, the firm was producing more steel than the entire country of Great Britain. Andrew Carnegie, who had spent his whole life establishing the Carnegie Steel Company, became bored of business and wanted to spend more time with his family in 1901. J.P. Morgan was a rising rival in the steel sector at the time. Carnegie, who was approaching 70 years old, began to consider selling his corporation. He put on a scrap of paper what he was going to accept, and Charles Schwab, the president of Carnegie Steel, brought the offer to Morgan. J.P. Morgan took one look at the offer and quickly accepted it. He paid $480 million for Carnegie Steel, making Carnegie the richest man in the world at the time. After selling his company, Carnegie broke all links with business and devoted himself entirely to philanthropy. He had a great place for libraries, which he ascribed with assisting him in achieving the financial success he had throughout his life. He provided nearly 2,500 libraries to places all around the world. Carnegie Hall, one of New York's most iconic monuments, was built and donated as the Music Hall by Carnegie in 1891. Its original name was changed to the current one after his death, not at his desire, but at the request of the Music Hall's board members. Carnegie's full-time job from 1901 until his death in 1919 in Lenox, Massachusetts, was giving away the huge fortunes he had amassed for himself. While Carnegie was a complicated and, at times, hypocritical guy who used brutal labor practices to make his factories profitable and made up slander to drive his competitors out of business, his philanthropic effect was as significant. It's difficult to understand how a guy who committed such abuses could become a saint. Perhaps he saw donating his money as a means to make up for his business failures. Earning money was a wonderful thrill for Carnegie, but giving it out was even better. If you enjoyed this story, hit the like button. And if you want to keep hearing more of these, hit the subscribe button. See you next time.